Thanks for joining in today, everybody. I'm your host, Mike Coyle, and you're listening to Insidexploration Twitter Spaces. On today's show, we have guest speaker Robert Sinn, who is a market commentator and a portfolio manager of about 19 years, somebody that I've followed very closely through social media. On Twitter, you can find him under the handle CEO Technician, and you can also find him on CEO.ca, where he is the most followed person, under the handle @Goldfinger. Robert, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Mike. It's great to be here. This is my first time trying the Spaces feature on Twitter. It seems like it's pretty cool because it's so easy to do, and it's kind of like a live podcast format, huh?
Yeah, indeed, and it's nice. You don't have to get all dressed up to be on camera and look pretty for everybody.
Yeah, man, I was all dressed up. So disappointed.
Well, I mean, I could always put you on an interview through Insidexploration. That's fine if you want to go that route.
I'm just kidding.
All right. Well, I wanted to get you on today to talk about metals and mining. You know, you often commentate and do interviews at 321 Gold, and you're pretty knowledgeable in this space. And as I mentioned, I've been following you for a few years, but we're in some really interesting times right now, you know, between inflation, supply crunch demands, nickel getting halted, emphasis on critical minerals and green energy. So as much as I know you're a gold bug, and so am I, you can't help but notice what's going on around you. So let's go to where this kind of started. Nickel was set and it was moving up in value. You know, we were getting to a point where we were entering a super cycle, and then that got extrapolated by what's happening in Europe. So give us your take on what transpired with nickel getting halted just a few weeks ago.
Nickel, yeah, that was pretty wild. You know, I wrote a little bit about it. Definitely not an expert on the nickel market, but from what I understand, basically, you had this Chinese large mining company that put on a very large hedge short position essentially, and it kind of got out of hand, and it was not just on the LME that they were short, but they were also short via different trades with various investment banks, kind of like a structured trade, with the investment bank on the other side finding the long. So it was like an off exchange short, which is something that we saw with that Bill Huang guy, the hedge fund manager who lost a huge amount of money in 2021. He was putting on all these trades, these structured trades through investment banks, so that he wouldn't show up as a 10% plus shareholder in a bunch of stocks. So seems like this Chinese mining company was doing something similar, and so their short position was just absolutely massive when you added it all up. And with what happened with Russia and the sanctions, you got this massive short squeeze going, and the nickel price went absolutely bonkers. I mean, one day it was 13 a pound, then it was 15, then it was 17, then it jumped over 20. And I think when they finally, shut it all down, it was over $40 a pound, which is, a record high, absolutely unheard of. Basically, the exchange decided to rewrite the rules of how things happen, and they canceled a bunch of trades, halted trading for a week. So basically, the only reason why they would do something like that is if their existence was at risk. Basically, there was insolvency there. If they allowed trading to continue, the margin calls were too big to be met. It would, basically the market was falling apart, and this is not something they would do for you or I if we lost all the, money in our account on some big short position. It's only if the counterparty was so big that it ruined the market essentially, and the debts couldn't be settled, in a relatively short period of time. So they did what they felt they had to do, but then as a result, you have to question everything about these markets,
Yeah, it was troubling to see that happen. I mean, I don't see how that's even legal to protect the large investor like that. Meanwhile, you're like, as you alluded to, the small shareholder, they would never do such a thing for any of us. So it's kind of disheartening. But I think what happened in all of that is it really emphasized, the problems with the metal market, particularly nickel, and the supply and demand crunch. With you've got Russia invading Ukraine, and all of a sudden, it's 25% of the nickel off the market. And so it's really pushing up the price of nickel. I think we're hovering around about $15 a pound right now. But what does that do to, the world is going towards green energy, and we want to invest money into the green sector, and nickel's a huge part of that. But with the price of nickel going up, wouldn't that snowball down to the price of an EV vehicle, and now that's becoming unattainable? Or do you think there's balance to be found here?
Well, it's a very complex and so many variables in this topic. But basically, we're seeing cost inflation all throughout the economy, including in electric vehicles. Like, all the input costs have gone up a lot since 2019. Tesla actually just recently raised the prices of a bunch of their vehicles, and so we're seeing this all throughout the economy. But what I'll say is that I think with these metals like copper and nickel, lithium, graphite, governments are becoming keenly aware that they need to secure their own supply, and cannot count on Russia or Indonesia or China to ship these metals across oceans all the time. And in the case of nickel, obviously, Russia has a huge nickel mine in Siberia, probably the largest and most profitable platinum and nickel mine in the history of the world. And obviously, Indonesia has some very big mines as well, and they're heavily influenced by China, and China kind of runs the market. So what Canada announced this week is obviously more support for this industry in Canada, and I think we'll see more of that in the U.S. There's really no nickel mines in the U.S. There's one small mine in Michigan that's going to run out of ore probably in 3 or 4 years. Talon Metals has a very interesting deposit in the U.S. Very, very high grade. They signed a like an MOU, an agreement with Tesla, but it's their mine. Even if all goes well, that won't be built for another 4 or 5 years. So the U.S. has this huge gap. They have no nickel. We have none basically. So we have to secure it from Canada. Essentially, and Canada also has a bunch of projects that are still years away from actually being fully permitted and built, right? So North America has a real shortage here, and I think that's what we're seeing in the nickel price above $15 a pound. So even it had that crazy parabolic short squeeze move, it's come back down, but it's consolidating at a new base, a much higher base than what we've seen in the last decade.
Well, I mean, it's gotten so intense that, since Truman was president of the United States and he implemented the War Act to get steel going for the Korean War. I mean, now we're seeing that again with Biden just making an announcement just last week that he's initiating this. And how much money is really being funneled into critical minerals in the United States? You would know more about this than I would.
I don't know. I can't keep up, but it's not enough. And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal this week basically saying that the Biden administration is talking out of both sides of their mouth. On one sense, they're saying that we support the electric vehicle industry, or we're going to do whatever it takes to make that industry grow, and on the other end, they're blocking new mines, right? And so there's got to be a reckoning here, and I think we're gonna see it. fairly soon. We're going to see something have to break. And most likely that will mean that more mines are going to have to be permitted and be supported by the federal government. We've got a bunch of huge, deposits, up in Alaska, copper mines, just massive, like some of the world's largest copper mines. And it's just excruciating to try to advance these things. It's just absolutely excruciating. They can't get permits to get roads built, yada, yada, yada. And obviously all of these very large projects in places like Alaska or the, Yukon or the Northwest Territories, the capex is just absolutely massive. I mean, you're talking about $3 to $5 billion, just as a starting point. So to foot that kind of bill, you have to have big support from the government. You have to have certainty of permitting, and that something's not going to happen after you spend all that and get it built that's going to cause the project to be canceled, or something like that. So we're going to see some big changes, I think, over the next couple of years, because it just has to happen. And so this is the revenge of the miners, as we hear about, and there's a lot of research on the copper market. It's just simply, we're probably okay in terms of the copper supply globally for the next couple of years, but around 2025, 2026, there's just this, we just drop off a cliff, and the mining industry doesn't move quickly. It just doesn't. To get a mine built and permitted and work out all the economics and get the financing, it's like a decade. So there's just not enough new copper, that's coming online here. So that means the price is going to have to go a lot higher.
Yeah, and that has a snowball effect, and that would be my concern. But I'm glad you brought that up, because for years, I think analysts have been saying the red tape in the mining industry is what really hinders projects from moving forward. So I hope you're right in your assessment that something's going to change in the next couple of years. I mean, the Canadian government on our side has put out a report or saying that they're going to put $1.5 billion over the next 7 years in infrastructure and development of critical mineral supply chain. They're talking about putting about $80 million for natural resources and public access to some of the data that's available out there. And they're going to put 30% into critical mineral exploration credits for particular projects, which is really great. I mean, this is huge for North America to get the recognition from our governments that we really need to buckle down and start producing our own resources. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this with such a commitment from our governments to advance things. But in saying that, where do you see urban mining fitting into this? We've got companies like ABML and BASF in the United States, and here in Canada, you've got companies like Lithium and an upcomer, St. George Eco Mining, who are entering the battery recycling space, and that space is just taking off. How big do you think that space can really be, considering the supply and demand crunch you just mentioned, where by 24 or 25 or 2024, 25, we're going to see a supply deficit in the market for copper and nickel and critical minerals?
What's your question? I didn't quite catch that about urban mining.
How does urban mining, so battery recycling essentially, and taking old stockpiles of ore and reprocessing them for some of these critical minerals, how do you see that playing into meeting the demand of the market?
I mean, obviously it's going to be part of the equation. It has to be. But I really don't know. What companies are doing that right now, and how easy it is it to recycle old batteries and such. I know there's some companies that do it with old cell phones, but that's obviously very small amount of metal. I just don't know enough about that subject.
That's fair. All right, Robert, we've talked enough about the macro outlook on things. I want to pick your brain about some of your plays. I've been following some of your articles lately and some posting, and I want to hear about some of your picks in the market today, maybe focused around critical minerals.
Actually, let's talk about gold.
Okay,
You called,
let's do.
you called me a gold bug, which I kind of cringe, when I hear that, but I guess I am because I've always owned some gold, so I guess that counts me as a gold bug. But there's a company called, Westhaven Gold, which put out a really interesting high grade intercept on Wednesday morning. And this is a company that I've followed
Huge.
since 2018. Oh yeah, absolutely huge. And what I want to say, I wrote a little blog about it. I published it on Thursday. You can find it if you look around, on my Twitter. But what I find interesting is that Westhaven in January 2021, so this, say early January 2021, if you look at the chart, the stock was trading around 75, 77 cents, in that range. Shortly thereafter, they announced a $13 or $15 million financing at 70 cents. And obviously the stock traded down to the financing price eventually. But it was 77 cents 14 months ago, or 15 months ago. It's 70 cents here this morning. So it's dropped 10% in 15 months. And it's interesting because they put out really good news on Wednesday. So I look back over the last year of news flow the company has put out, and they've achieved a lot in 15 months. They put out a maiden resource estimate for the south zone. So only one zone at Shovel Nose. There's multiple zones, at this flagship project. They put out a resource for south zone, 1.1 million ounces, in all categories, a little over 2 grams per ton gold equivalent. Not bad for a starter. And they've drilled the crap out of the project. They've drilled multiple zones over 4,000 meter strike length, some really good intercepts, if you look at their website. And then obviously Wednesday, they put out this hole that was like 23 meters of 40 grams gold equivalent, essentially, just a world-class intercept. And it's an important intercept because it's not in isolation. This is in a zone that's in between the south zone and the north end of the project. So there's high grade gold intercepts at the very north end. There's some really, really high grade zones at the south zone, and now they're filling in, in the center. And so that's really important. And this is a low sulfidation epithermal system. So there's going to be like these high grade gold and silver shoots throughout the system. You just have to find them. And it's not that easy with a diamond core drill. Think about how small that thing is in terms of its width. It's not so easy to find these things sometimes, and it's taken them some time to figure it out. But it seems like they're figuring it out now, And so I just look at how the junior mining market works, not necessarily saying I want to buy, Westhaven here or whatever. I did buy it a couple of days ago, but that's not the point of talking about this. The point is that the stock is down 10% in 15 months, yet the company has put out a lot of good news. And what that tells me is that the junior mining, the junior gold sector in particular, is very much moves as a sector. Yep. And when the sector is in favor, valuations go way up. They can get a little frothy. And when the sector is out of favor, you get these opportunities to buy stocks basically at lower prices, despite the fact that the fundamental story is way better, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen companies that should be trading multiples higher. Going back a couple of years when gold was trading at 1,200 an ounce, and now it's trading in around 19 plus. And these miners are valued at about the same thing they were 3 years ago. It's insane. Let's talk about PUMA Exploration. I see you've been covering that. I caught an article you wrote about it a few weeks ago. It's somebody that we follow as well. I've been on the property. It's pretty impressive. What's your take on PUMA so far in this early exploration project?
Well, I think with PUMA, you've had a really good start to exploring this project. They put out a lot of really good results in the last year. Some really impressive high grade intercepts. They've had stuff like 50 meters of 5 grams, some really broad intercepts. And if they continue to expand the O'Neill trend along strike, if they can expand this to 600 or 700 meters and keep getting these results, I think the market's going to have trouble ignoring it. This could be 100 million market cap very quickly. And I know they're drilling right now. I think they're like 20 holes into this phase of drilling, so we should get a lot of news soon, and those results will be market moving.
Yeah, I think so. I've been on the property. I drove in there, and along the whole contact where the rhyolite meets the sediment, it's quite highly mineralized. I mean, you don't walk onto a property very often and see large quartz vein sets that are just 4 or 5 feet below the surface. It's so impressive. And they say when you have a deposit, it speaks to you. Well, this thing was singing at the top of its lungs when I walked on the property. I've done it twice now because I was passing through on a secondary site visit. It's just incredible. I mean, if you look long and hard enough, you're going to find visible gold anywhere you look on this project. The company can't say that, but I can, because it, so I'll just throw that out there.
Look at their grab samples.
Right?
You don't even have to go to the project. You can just read the news. They've got these grab samples like 4 ounces of gold.
Yeah. 371 grams per ton is the highest. 244 grams per ton. Mind you, these are grabs; they're selective in nature. Yeah. But I mean, they seem to correlate with the drilling. So if you look at the link zone where you mentioned 5.55 gram per ton over 50 meters, that was directly underneath where they hit the grab sample of 241 grams per ton in the Lynx vein 1. I mean, it appears from the look at the core that the grab samples where they recently reported are going to extrapolate down below as well. So I'm really curious to see how that project develops. Do you have any plans to make it out to the property, Robert?
No plans at this time, but if they put out some more good drill results and they give me an invitation, I'd be happy. And Canada lets me in. I'm not sure what the deal is with the vaccines and stuff, but yeah, I'd be happy to take a look at the project. I've actually never been to that part of Canada, so yeah, I mean, I'd love to take a look at it.
Oh, it's impressive. I hope you get the opportunity to see it for yourself, because it's one of those projects that, you'll appreciate the data that comes out, but when you walk on that ground, it's something special. It really is. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about another gold project that you're very keen on. Give me some more picks. Throw some stuff out there for us.
Oh, gold project. So you have Banyan Gold, which is a company that I followed for about 5 years, and they just keep putting out solid news flow. They keep expanding the Ormac project, the power line zone, and this is turning into a multi-million ounce gold deposit in a great location with good infrastructure, governments spending money on new roads, bridges, power lines. This is just it seems like everything is working for Banyan right now. We'll get an updated resource most likely in June, and I'm optimistic that will show 4 million plus ounces of gold.
Nice.
The last one they put out was around 1 million ounces, so it's a huge improvement. And as soon as they put out that resource in June, it'll be stale. They're drilling 30,000 meters. This year they got 3 rigs going around the clock right now. So it's a busy year for Banyan. And even though the stock has moved up from, let's say, 30 cents to 48 cents, I think it's just scratching the surface. This could be worth $1, fairly easily in the next 12 months. So yeah, I mean, I got to stick with what's worked, and Banyan has definitely worked well.
And what's the thing for that for our listeners?
It's B like boy, Y, N like Nancy on the venture.
Awesome. So I know you want to stick with gold, but I got to pick your brain. One of my favorite nickel plays in the market today, and one of the few in the Canadian market that you can gain exposure to nickel through, is CNC, Canada Nickel. This is a rapidly developing, massive deposit, and it's not just Crawford. The market, I don't think, has picked up on the fact that these guys have just added 20 properties, 10 of which are being compared to Crawford. What's your take on this project?
Yeah, Canada Nickel's been one of the best stories for me the last 3 years, I guess. Geez, it's 2 years. Yeah. So I remember I bought my first shares. I think it was February or March 2020, just before the COVID crash happened, and that was kind of a painful month, but the stock snapped back very well. And I think my first purchase was around 35 or 40 cents. Eventually, the stock has traded above $4. So it's been a 10 bagger, absolutely well run company. I think that Mark Selby is one of the top CEOs, in the business. I met with him in Las Vegas last week, and they just closed a $51 million bought deal, kind of a well-timed bought deal. They announced that the day that the LME halted trading in the nickel futures. So nickel was going bonkers. It was all over the news, and Mark was pretty shrewd and took that opportunity to get this bought deal done and get all the financing the company needs for the next 12 plus months. So, they got the money in the bank. The stock price is down a bit, and they've got a nice set of milestones, including a feasibility study that they'll publish probably by the end of this year. So it's kind of set up for the company to meet these milestones. I think they're working on all these option projects, these properties that they option from Noble in the last several months. And so you put it all together, this district could be very large. I mean, I don't know how big it'll eventually be, but it's in the billions of tons. It could be 10 or 20 billion tons, when it's all said and done. And, a lot of the negatives on the project, everybody talks about the grade, 0.25, 0.27, nickel is, they don't think it's economic, but I think we have to think about the scale of the project. And mining is about scale. It's about the marginal cost per ton. Okay. How big is the mill going to be? And then, at $7 per pound, nickel prices, maybe 0.25 is not economic, but I think 15 to 20 is our new price range, and that changes the economics completely. And there's just not any other projects of this scale out there. So obviously we need to see the details of the feasibility study. I'm sure the CapEx bill is going to be bigger than the PEA. Obviously, we've had inflation throughout the industry, and this project is just getting bigger and bigger. So that's more cost. But when you think about the majors like a Vale or what have you, this is the sort of project that they would want to have.
Well, it's in Glencore's backyard. Let's not forget. And Glencore got infrastructure already in place from the Kidd Creek mining operation, which is getting to depths where it's almost unattainable at this point. So Glencore is going to need to start looking at nickel supply. Not only does Glencore need to start looking at that, yes, they have exposure in Sudbury, but in my backyard, there's a company called Electra Battery Metals who's trying to build a battery park here, and they're going to be looking for supply. And they just announced a deal with Glencore for an offtake agreement for the first 18 months of production. They're going to buy all of their nickel once they get up and running. But I mean, with the Ontario government recently announcing a gigafactory in Southern Ontario, I think CNC is perfectly situated and primed to be a supplier for many, many years to come, provided that we can sustain nickel prices. But I mean, even at $7.50 a pound, I believe that's what the PEA was quoted at. It
Yeah.
showed profitability, and now you're like double that. Plus, they've improved their economics, or not economics, but improved their metallurgical process. So that's adding points to the NPV. I mean, this is looking like it's going to be a very robust long-term project. So I invite anybody who's listening today to do their due diligence on this project. I think it's an absolute home run, and over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see this grow exponentially.
So they have Osenko as the firm that's doing the feasibility study, and that's a very reputable firm. So this is going to be a real feasibility study, and there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on it once they publish it. And I think that will be assuming that it's positive, I think it'll be hugely positive for the share price. And they don't need to raise any more, money, between now and then. So there's no more shares, that are going to be out there. The float is the float right now. So, if this bull market keeps running, and we see more government, support for this industry in Canada, and as you said, with the Tesla factory being built, seems like a pretty good place to be invested. And of course, I'm long, I'm biased, and I'm talking my book there, but I think it's a good one.
Biased as biased can be when it comes to Canada Nickel. I've been here since the inception of the project. In fact, I was watching it long before when we were working with Noble Minerals, who owned the project prior to Mark Selby coming into the fold. So super excited about that one. A mutual friend of ours reached out to me and said that you're on to this big nickel play in the U.S. Any insight as to what
BTT? BTT. I mean, I don't want to hype it up too much here, but I'll just say I own a lot of shares in the company. It's highly speculative. It's a drill play. You can look at my posts on social media. I've written quite a bit about it, but basically we're waiting for assays from the LM project. They drilled 6 holes in this last phase of drilling. Okay. They intersected semi-massive sulfides in 2 different holes. So we're waiting for assays on those to see just how high the tenor is. This is not something where these results are going to send the stock to 3x or 4x or anything. It's just, it will be confirmation that they're getting closer to what could be the main ore body. So this is a process of finding the keel of a conduit, a magmatic conduit. So basically the magma flowed up from deep in the earth at some point many million years ago. It formed this conduit, basically a channel where the fluid flowed. And because the semi-massive and massive sulfides are higher density, they eventually settle out and cool at a lower point in the system, right? It's basically the base of the conduit. So the company has been trying to figure out where the base, the keel of this conduit is at this project, very similar to two nearby mines that are owned by Lundin Mining. And so basically they're just doing this exploration work because this looks, like an analog. So we don't have a smoking gun yet. We don't have a new discovery that we can shout from the rooftops, but we've got a lot of sniffs that there's something there. They're finding the drill has clipped the toenail of the ore body, and so they still need to find the meat of it. I'm very optimistic that they will, but it's a drill play, super speculative. It could be a 10x or it could be a 0, right?
Well, that's exploration for you. The truth is in the ground. There's been so many times where I've seen cores that look phenomenal and they run nothing, and then cores that look meh and they run all kinds of great. So, truth is in the ground.
Yep.
last question I'm going to ask is, who's your top pick for 2022 for success this year? What do you think?
Oh, man, that's such a hard question.
Ah, come on. Give me three then. If you can't
I forget.
give me
So in
three
the
in no particular.
stock picking contest, I'm trying to think who I picked in the stock picking contest. It was BTT was one of them for sure. My God, what's wrong with me, Robert? I can't remember my picks.
I picked CNC PUMA.
Oh, I picked endurance, EDG. Okay. EDG. There's another gold play. So I have like 250,000 shares of endurance. I've been buying it since 20 cents last September. I bought it all the way up to 42 cents recently. I think I'm pretty full in my position right now. Obviously, I'm very biased because I have $100,000 in the company. But this is a drill play in BC. It's not just a drill play. They've drilled a lot of gold. You can take a look at their presentation. Last year they had some incredible intercepts, some really broad, high-grade gold intercepts, like 20 plus meters of 10 plus grams in multiple holes. So they're going to be back at the Reliance project in 2 weeks to resume drilling, fully funded. They have $4 or $5 million in the treasury. They might do another raise, later in the summer, if they have good results. But they don't need any, money right now. So they'll be back out there drilling in 2 weeks. And if you go through their presentation, I'm going to spend too much time on it, but take a look for yourself and do your own work. Don't take my word for it. But they've got some really exciting drill targets in the south end of this project where they just started to drill and do some exploration work, like some soil sampling last year. And the results they've had to date have been exceptional. And what really has me intrigued is the CEO, Robert Boyd, basically said that their highest grade hole last year just clipped the edge of what they're interpreting to be this feeder structure that goes straight to depth. Based upon everything they're seeing, they hit the edge of what they believe will be a very, very high grade gold feeder structure that goes to depth. So that will be one of the first primary targets of this next phase of drilling. So it's a target rich environment. They already have probably proven over 1 million ounces of gold in all zones of this project. So it's a great starting point. It's not just like flying blind and hoping that they hit something with a drill. They have very, very good targeting at this project, and they just need to expand, the zones, along strike and at depth.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for the insight on these projects, Robert, and thanks for taking the time to join today at our Twitter space. And we'll have to get together and do this again real soon.
Great. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate the invitation.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining our Inside Exploration Twitter spaces. We'll get to the next one.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning into our Twitter space today. If you enjoyed the content of our show, please subscribe to our channel and follow us at insidexploration.com. If you're looking for our social media handles, they can be found in the description below. Thanks again for joining us. I'm your host, Mike Coyle, and you're watching Inside Exploration.